once we lost that game, everybody bought in, things took off, and then I left, and then Pete Carroll era just continued on the upward trajectory and won national championship after national championship.
You didn't even mention you win the Heisman Trophy.
Won the Heisman, which was cool.
That's pretty cool, huh? This podcast is presented by Visa, a network giving small businesses tools to grow, overcoming the odds, rewriting the playbook, delivering under pressure. The MVPs of small business lead their teams to victory all year long. Visa is proud to provide playmakers everywhere with more tools to help grow their businesses and help them achieve even greater success. Because the more people we can empower, the more we all win. Visa, a network giving small businesses tools to grow. Well, welcome back to Beyond the X's and O's. Today we get to sit down with a guy that I just have so much respect for, Carson Palmer. He's a guy that in the quarterback fraternity circles, we're all playing, we're all talking to each other, we're together in the offseason. This was the dude we all thought was elite, that wasn't getting the recognition he was deserving. A lot of times because he went to bad teams and made them better. An elite talent, an elite leader, an elite human being. I love his take today. He talks about the first time his parents gave him permission to play football. He remembers that moment. He says he doesn't remember a lot about his childhood, but he remembers that moment when his parents gave him permission to first play football when he was an elementary school student. He talks about moving around, getting down to Southern California, playing for a legendary high school program. His time with his private quarterback trainer, Bob Johnson, a legendary coach, and how much he learned from him. The recruiting journey. Carson was highly recruited. He was really one of the first guys that went through this glamorous, high-profile recruiting. Gets to USC, goes through two different coaches, talks about his time with Pete Carroll, a senior year that leads him to a Heisman and an Orange Bowl victory, a pre-draft process that allows him to be picked number 1 overall by the Bengals. I love he has a really funny pre-draft story of all his buddies getting to do all this stuff as they're going through the pre-draft process, and he doesn't get to do any of it because he knows he's going to the Bengals and none of the other coaches want to talk to him. At the very end of this conversation is really where I found the gold. He gives some parenting advice that is absolutely brilliant and honestly, it's to you quarterback dads. So a lot of you quarterback dads are watching this. This advice that he gives is to you, and it'll help you be a better quarterback dad. So sit back and enjoy our time with Carson Palmer. Well, fired up for today's guest, Carson Palmer, a guy I've admired for a lot of years, become friends with him over the years, and just love the way he played ball. And his story is unique, and we'll jump right into it. So Carson, we don't really talk about a lot of the stuff the mainstream media talks about. What we do love talking about is growing up and then your kind of launch point as a quarterback. So take us back. You're born in Fresno, California, place dear to me. You get kind of big and strong. You move down to Orange County, play at Santa Margarita High School. Kind of talk to me through that journey when you know you're going to be a quarterback, and then we'll jump into some of your high school playing days.
Yeah, so I was born in the know. In 1979.
You're young.
Youngster. Yeah, born in the know, lived there for a little while, I moved around a bunch as a kid. I moved from Fresno to Southern California, to Colorado Springs, Colorado, back to Fresno for 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Then in junior high, moved to Laguna Niguel, back to Southern California, and then stayed in Southern California from junior high through high school. And I'll never forget the first year I was begging my parents to play football. They always said no. My dad didn't play. My mom didn't like the possible injuries and Actually, concussions weren't really I don't know if concussions were really a term at that point. But bell
dinged
ring.
Up. We called it dinged up.
Dinged up, bell rung, whatever it was. And I was in Colorado Springs, and I'll never forget, I was in the garage, and my mom had this old white Cadillac Eldorado. And I was in the garage, and we were getting ready to play. We played like remember rollerblades were hot back in the day? We played roller hockey in the neighborhood with the kids. And so we would take an old broom and duct tape the broom into the shape of a hockey stick. We didn't have hockey sticks. And I was in there and I was working on my hockey stick and get ready to go out play with the kids. and my mom had pulled into the driveway. She's like, "Hey, I want you to know your dad and I made a decision." And they said, and they told me they're going to let me play football. And I'll never forget that day. I don't remember much about my childhood, but I have not forgotten that day, because it was a constant dinner table talk, please, no, please, pretty, please, no, pretty, no. And so finally they gave me the okay. And I remember I had a shoulder pad with the old school white tubed neck roll.
Yeah.
I had the Thurman Thomas face mask. My dad got me elbow pads. And I just played first. I played running back and linebacker because there was no throwing at that age. I think I was in 5th grade maybe. And so I fell in love with the game, playing running back and linebacker. And then as I progressed into junior high, they tried me at quarterback, and I just, from there on, always played quarterback. And they moved me to free safety so you wouldn't get hurt, as the likelihood of getting hurt was less. But from that moment on, I fell in love, and that's all I wanted to do.
Were you a big kid? Like, were you the tall, skinny kid, or did you hit your growth spurt? Like, because what'd you play at, about 6'5", 235, somewhere in that realm?
Yeah. I was 6'5", 232 every year of my career. Still 232. A lot of that muscles turned to fat. No, a lot of that muscles turned to fat, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I was the biggest kid probably in class and on the team, and always had a little more athleticism than most kids, and drive. And I think from stories I've heard through kids I played with, or coaches, you don't know if you're a leader or not. You just naturally fall into place wherever you do. And so I was always told I was a great leader, and I was just gung-ho for it. Where some kids were like, yeah, this is football season, the next season's lacrosse or soccer. It was football season, and I was dragging guys along, like, be committed, be here every day. And I didn't realize what that was at that time. I just loved the sport and wanted to win, and wanted as many kids to be as passionate and all in as I was. And you just don't find that at that age. I mean, there's half kids that's their last year playing football, and then another quarter will play for maybe another year or two, and then it fizzles out. But I was all in, and wanted guys, and wanted to be surrounded by guys that had the same mindset I did. So I just naturally was always bigger, was always very focused and very determined, and naturally leading came very natural. And my way of leading from the time I first started playing all the way through my career was not the rah cheerleader yelling and screaming. It was just doing everything right, doing a little bit extra, giving it everything you got. Every play is balls to the wall, no matter what. And that was just that was a natural ability that I had at that age.
I want to dig into that a little bit, because there's so many kids that watch this, coaches, and everybody. I always say, I don't even know what leadership is anymore. There's so many definitions for it. Choose to use the word influence more than leadership. I find myself using that word more. But where do you think your ability to lead, and that ability to stay focused and locked in and lead by example and work harder and do the lonely work, was that something that was modeled in your household? Is that something that was taught to you by a coach? Where do you think that came from?
I don't know. I don't know that. I think that's just what was in me. I don't have a favorite player. I was not sitting around watching football. I can't tell you. I didn't really have a team growing up. When I lived in Colorado Springs, I kind of followed Denver because Elway was there. But that's just because I walked through the room to get water to go back outside and play, and my dad was watching the Broncos or whatever that was. But I didn't grow up sitting around the TV, waiting for Monday Night Football. I watched Monday Night Football because that's when we ate dinner, and my dad was watching the game. So I watched it. And as soon as I was done eating, I'd be back outside. And my brother Jordan and I would sit across the street. We lived in a little cul-de-sac, and we would get on one side of the street and the other and just throw, and punt the ball to each other and catch it, see how many in a row we could go before the ball hit the ground. But sitting around watching football and having, a mentor or a favorite player wasn't part of my vocabulary. I wasn't trying to be like Elway or Montana. I just wanted to be outside playing, and I didn't want to sit down on the ground. Maybe I had ADD, still have a little bit of it. Maybe I just didn't have the attention span to sit through commercials and watch, or I just didn't have the desire to watch other people play. I wanted to do it myself. So I was out in the neighborhood playing, pickup games and basketball and football and catch and all those things. But I didn't grow up watching one individual team or one individual player and saying, I want to lead like Elway, or I want to throw the ball like Aikman. I wanted to be outside doing it myself.
That's awesome. All right. So you get down to Southern California, or back down to Southern California, and you go to Santa Margarita High School. A couple of things I want you to talk about here. Number one, just kind of that first starting experience, that first touchdown pass, what the nerves were like, just that whole, that first time. And then kind of what that high school vibe was like. You obviously paid for a legendary coach. You can talk about Bob Johnson, but that whole vibe down there.
Yeah. I mean, I was on a great freshman football team. I think I'm sure we won every game and won the championship. And at the end of my freshman football season, the thing that sticks out in my mind most is I don't remember the first touchdown pass. I don't even remember the first win, but the thing that sticks out in my mind, yeah, I don't. The thing that I always think back to when I was a kid is I got pulled up from the freshman team to varsity at the end of the varsity season. We went to a good football school in Santa Margarita, Catholic high school. And I was sitting in the team room and we were getting ready to go out and play. And I got to wear the sweet unis, you go from freshman unis where they're like the white, really uncomfortable practice pants that you wear for games and practices, the jersey that you wash on Fridays to play in, but it was all the same. Then you get to go play with the varsity and they're like the sheer, the nice looking unis. And I was all excited about that. I remember sitting down in that team room and Jim Hardigan was the head coach and he came in and to give the pump up pregame speech. And I remember sitting in the back of the room around all these high school kids that are 2-3 years older than me. And the starter at the time was a guy named Chris Collins. And he was a great high school player, went to Stanford on a full ride scholarship for baseball, a great baseball player, and was really a great quarterback, great athlete. And I remember sitting in that team room and Jim Hardigan was giving his pump up speech and he was really talking to Chris about leading the team. And I just felt like the whole conversation was focused on Chris. And there was so much pressure in that room because everybody's looking to Chris to win the game. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in that meeting and watching Jim Hardigan give that speech and looking at Chris and looking back at Jim and Chris. And everything was focused on Chris and the pressure he was putting on Chris to make sure we won this game. He was the starting quarterback and probably the starting middle linebacker. And I remember sitting in there going, I want that. I want that. I want that feeling that Chris must have right now. I want that pressure that Chris must be just relishing in. And then that was Chris's senior year. He left. And then I took over that spot the next year and I had it my sophomore year. And I just fell in love with the pressure and I fell in love with the weight of the team on your shoulders and the school and, the student body on your shoulders. And Chris had that and I wanted it and I sought after it. And then I finally got it and won the job my sophomore year. And it was no looking back from then on.
Now, that's really interesting because you're the first of all the guys we've talked to that articulate it that way, loved the burden of the position, the pressure that comes with it, all eyes on you. I know most every quarterback has that's successful, but you don't hear it articulated that often. As you now you put your coach's hat on and you've watched quarterbacks come behind you since post-career, you've worked with quarterbacks, you see a lot of quarterbacks. Can you kind of tell if a guy has the stuff based on whether he wants that pressure or whether he shies away from that pressure?
I always equated it to once I got to the NFL, I had a great quarterback coach named Ken Zampese. I'm sure you bumped into Ken. He's now the QB coach in Washington. Brilliant X's and O's guy and taught me a ton about football. And my first year starting in Cincinnati, we, as you get draft picks and these young guys come in and The one thing we'd always talk about is we just drafted a kid in the first or second or third round in that first preseason game. What are their eyeballs like in the huddle? And that would be the first thing we talked about. And that's where I learned to recognize it. You can see in the huddle, when you look around that huddle and you see that guy that's staring at you like this and his shoulders start to slump as you're calling the first play of the game, or you see that guy that as you're calling the play, he's getting closer because he can't wait to hear if it's his number that's getting called on this individual play.
Yeah.
So that's what I always looked for. And it's really hard to look for unless you're standing in the huddle. But you can see it now. I mean, when you watch a game and you see a young guy that, is a highly touted guy and he comes in that first game and he's erratic with his feet, and all of a sudden he was so natural with a constant whip of his throwing motion, then things start to change. You can see real quick when the bright lights blinded that player, and they blinded their focus, and they blinded their decision making, and they blinded their leadership ability. So I always look for a guy when their first opportunity, when they got that first chance to go out there and play, do they look like they're worried about the bright lights? Do they look like they're worried about the camera and the stadium that's full? Or are they relishing in it and they can't wait for the next play? Even though they may have thrown a pick on the first one, they can't wait to redeem themselves their next opportunity. Or do they the shoulders kind of slump and they kind of fall backwards into that moment? And that's the first thing that I've always looked for.
That's awesome. I want to go back to high school a little bit. And I misspoke. I know Bob Johnson wasn't your high school coach. He was your private quarterback coach. And it's relevant because I know Bob had a huge influence on your life. And now your brother, Jordan, is probably as influential as anybody in the quarterback space. You see kind of a new generation, and you were really one of the first guys that had your quarterback guru, coach, mentor on the side. How much did that relationship allow you to develop in high school?
It was tremendous. I mean, I remember my dad found an ad in like Student Sports Magazine, which was this publication back in the day. It was like the only high school publication. And there was an ad in the back that at Saddleback Junior College in Mission Viejo, there were these throwing camps on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And so as soon as I went to the first one, like probably after my first seventh grade football season. And I was out there with a bunch of local high school guys that went on and played at some smaller schools, or maybe didn't play, but had successful high school careers. And I remember at seventh grade, those guys would show up and there wasn't a difference in the velocity of the ball, the accuracy of the balls that I was throwing compared to them. And Bob pulled me to the side one day after the first day. Hey, what's your name again? Where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. What grade are you in? You're in seventh grade? You sure? It was kind of one of those conversations. And at one of the first couple times I was throwing on the weekends with him, my kind of a light bulb went on, like, oh, wait, like this could be bigger than just high school football or junior high football. There could be something here. And so I went back every chance I could. Any days that those camps were going on, and those camps started to grow. Bob was just growing his business at the time. It was me and maybe 3 or 4 other guys the first couple times. And then it was 5 or 6, and then 10, and then 20. And then there were weekend long camps where you spent the night at his house and you threw all day. And then it became to what some of the stuff that you've been doing, some of the stuff that Jordan's doing, where, it's as important almost as your season is, that you get all those reps and you get all that work in the off season. And I remember at a young age realizing through Bob's words, like, hey, you got a chance to do this in college. And then we'll talk about later, but you got a chance to do this and get to college. And that was my way to get to college. I wasn't a strong student. I didn't have straight A's. I wasn't going to be able to get into universities with my grades. So I needed college. I needed somebody to pay for it. And I needed an acceptance to different universities that I could get through football that I wasn't going to get without football. So that was my kind of path to the next level of playing football and getting a chance to go to a college.
That's cool. Well, I want to get in. We're going to go to a break. When we get back, I want to talk about your recruiting journey, because obviously an incredibly successful high school career and then big time recruit and your time at USC. So we'll be right back. It's football season, baby. And you know what that means. It means we're going for 2 here with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. Blitzing through hairs has never been easier, and it's time you join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code DIMES. at manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping. It's 3 and out the window with all other trimmers. Now go tame that Wildcat offense. The world is starting to open, and the Performance Package 4.0 for Manscaped is here to help you get ready. Inside, you'll find their brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, boy do I need that, Crop Reviver toner, plus 2 free gifts, Performance Boxer briefs, and the Shed travel bag. The Performance Package 4.0 from Manscaped is the perfect package for your package and a key for a great grooming and hygiene routine to make sure the boys downstairs are smooth like Tom Brady in the fourth quarter. The brand new Lawnmower 4.0 is here to take your defense to the next level. This 4th generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a 7,000 RPM motor. A new multi-function on-off switch can engage a travel lock and gives you the ability to turn the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave. Did I mention this trimmer is waterproof too? Rain, snow, or sleet are no match for the waterproof power of the 4.0. This package also comes with the Weed Whacker. This elite nose and ear hair trimmer is also waterproof and uses a 9,000 RPM motor-powered 360-degree rotary dual-blade system. This trimmer also has a proprietary skin-safe technology which helps prevent nicks, snags, and tugs. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code DIMES at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code DIMES. This podcast is presented by Visa, a network giving small businesses tools to grow, overcoming the odds, rewriting the playbook, delivering under pressure. The MVPs of small business lead their teams to victory all year long. Visa is proud to provide playmakers everywhere with more tools to help grow their businesses and help them achieve even greater success. Because the more people we can empower, the more we all win. Visa, a network giving small businesses tools to grow. Back with Carson Palmer. And, again, he touched on his private quarterback coach, Bob Johnson's experience at Saddleback with these quarterback camps. It's funny, Carson, we had Mark Sanchez on, a guy that followed you to USC and obviously had a great career there and really good NFL career. And he talked about the same thing, how when he started going to Bob's passing camps, how the confidence grew because he could throw it like everybody else. He would watch you. He talked about how he idolized you and the ability to watch you each weekend was such a huge influence to him. And it's cool because, like you said, it's almost as important as your season because these off-season camps, the exposure, and it pours gasoline on your recruiting. So talk to me a little bit about your recruiting experience and then how you landed at USC, and then we'll get into your time at USC.
Yeah. So my sophomore year, when I became the starter, was when recruiting started. After that season, I think we won every game and won the CIF championship. And being a bigger kind of power conference school in Southern California, if you're on a good team, recruiters show up. And so slowly, especially as some of the older guys in the team were getting recruited, they would notice the tall, skinny kid that's 15 or whatever I was at the time. And so I started getting invited to just a different camps. And it wasn't Elite 11. I forget the name of it back then, but there was an Elite 11 like competition that were being held in LA and Riverside and kind of all over Central and Southern California. And I started going to those, and that's when I started just getting offers. Because I was a bigger kid as a sophomore. I was probably 6'4", 6'5", probably just under 200 pounds. And
oh, wow.
I could run around and make plays with my feet. I could throw it all over the place. And I started going to these different, I think it might've been student sports that was running these camps where it was like the top quarterbacks, receivers, DBs, and tight ends. And it wasn't as professional, probably as well run as some of the Elite 11 and stuff that you've been involved in over the last decade or so. But those videos would then go out, and those videos of the on-field drills would go out, and I just started getting calls and letters in the mail and offers. And I I started also going, I went to the University of Colorado football camp. I went to the USC football camp. I went to the Boston College camp. But as soon as I started going to camps, I was getting offers on the spot. When I would go at the end of it, they'd give me a scholarship offer. And then once you get a couple and you're young, you're a sophomore, everybody starts coming in and recruiting just because a handful of local guys are recruiting you. So after my sophomore year, it was on, and recruiting had really picked up some steam.
Did that change at all, or would you just handle it? I mean, your personality, I've known you a long time. I wouldn't guess it changed you at all, but was that weird at school, being the big man on campus and having all these offers at such a young age?
No, because I didn't really talk about them. Nobody really knew until my senior year, when I was getting pulled out of class because, John Robinson, the coach at USC, would show up, and I'd get, that slip in class, or you got to go to the football coach's office. That started happening weekly. And that's my senior year. Once publications and, the Student Sports Magazine started coming out and ranking players, that's when guys started figuring, and classmates started figuring out that I was getting heavily recruited. But it wasn't something that I was publicizing or talking about, or you couldn't post pictures back then, obviously, on Instagram of an official scholarship offer. But nobody really knew what was going on until my senior year, when there was no way to hide it.
Can you sympathize? I don't know if sympathize is the right word. Can you appreciate what these kids now go through with all the eyeballs on them, and how some of them go crazy because the attention become absorbed with the recruiting process and lose focus on what's important? I mean, now as an old man, can you sit back and go, wow, if I would have had to gone through that would have changed? Because I know I can. I wasn't nearly as highly recruited as you, but I don't think I was mature enough. I know I wasn't mature enough at that age to handle everything that these kids deal with. Do you have an appreciation? Maybe that's the word for what they go through now.
Yeah, I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah.
I don't think it's, there's certain sides of it that are a benefit to be under that scrutiny from a young age, because it only intensifies and ramps up, as opposed to, I just kind of skeeted along and played basketball and football, and then boom, I'm in Los Angeles and I'm in a room full of 60 reporters in a press conference. Now these kids have TV shows. Now there's high school kids getting paid with NFT deals and all that kind of stuff. I personally don't think it's healthy. I just can't imagine a 16-year-old kid. It was enough on me, like being a 16-year-old kid, like, man, Bob Davie, the Notre Dame coach, flew in to come and watch me practice today on a Wednesday. That blew my head up for sure. But I can't imagine, and back then too, you would get a call on your landline at your house. Mm-hmm. But as you know, with kids, you went from school to practice to weight training. You didn't get home until 8:30 at night. You got to be up early the next day. So my mom had like this very specific window of like 8:30 to 9:30 when coaches could call. And now it's 24/7. I mean, you can get tweeted, you can get Instagram DM'd, you can get all these different avenues of attention from Brian Kelly's of the world and, Nick Saban's. And I think that, that relentless pursuit that these kids are under now just isn't healthy. I was able to be a high school kid. Nobody thought I was just a kid. Nobody thought I was anything special, because they didn't know that all these things were going on. Now, all these classmates of these kids know there's TV cameras following this kid at school, and, as a sophomore and a junior. And, Nick Saban put out a tweet to so-and-so and the world saw it. And, there's so many avenues of distraction for kids these days. Back then, it was very narrow. That window where a coach could call you or a coach could visit you was really narrow. Now it's so open. And the pursuit is exhausting on these kids that I'm sure it's affecting kids in a lot of negative ways. And they are, like you said, losing their mind.
All right. So you're an old man now. You're a father of 4. You've had a 15-year NFL career, multiple Pro Bowls, made tons of money, blah, 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 blah. Johnny Pink Socks right now is watching, right? He's a 5-star recruit out of Texas. He's a sophomore, junior. His life is being turned upside down because everywhere he goes, they want to talk about recruiting. What would you tell him? I mean, it's reality. We're living in it. It's not going to change. I agree with you 100%. It's not healthy, but it's not going to change. It's only going to amp up more with NILs and all these different things, what would you tell them?
I think the main thing is just you can't take yourself too seriously. You
Yep.
are who you are. And I'll never forget you and I won't say who, you and I were playing in a certain golf tournament, and there was a certain young player there
Yep.
that showed up with a full crew of bodyguards.
Yep.
And you and I
Very
kind of looked
famous
over at the
guy.
side. Yeah.
Yeah.
You and I kind of looked over on the side and we were like, are those? And Michael Jordan walked around without a bodyguard. Michael Jordan walked around with his son,
Yep.
And I remember at that moment, that you and I had a discussion about what we thought about that. And I remember at that moment, I was like, that's the definition. That guy's just taking himself way too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And that's easy to do now. I mean, it wasn't very easy to do when you and I were coming out. But now, with all the love these guys are getting, all the attention, all the potential, different routes where you can make money now as an amateur, what was, a couple of years ago considered an amateur, guys just take themselves too seriously. You are who you are. You are who your parents raised. You're who your buddies know is the kid that grew up down the street. But once you start buying in to all this attention and thinking you are, or you need to be somebody different or be somebody special, I just think that's a pitfall of a lot of guys. They just take themselves too seriously.
I couldn't agree more. It's almost as if all the publicity, all the attention lies to them and makes them think they're more important than anybody else. And it's that humility, which me and you both will tell them is coming one way or the other, right? You're going to get humbled. You might as well learn at an early age to treat others better than yourself, or think of others higher than yourself, because if you don't, you're going to get humbled real quick. All right, let's hit the USC career, because it was an incredible USC career. I mean, I was a fan of you while I was in the NFL and you were playing at USC, and I couldn't get enough of watching you play. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you redshirted, correct?
So I played my true freshman year.
Okay.
And we weren't very good. And then my true sophomore year, I at Oregon, I tried to run over a linebacker and broke my shoulder. I broke my collarbone.
That's when you redshirted. And
so it was in the second game. And if you got hurt back then, the rule was if you got hurt pre-week 3, that year could count as a redshirt year. So broke my collarbone. I think I broke it at the perfect time. I broke my collarbone on the last play of the first half of the second week. Had I broken it on the first play of the third quarter in week 3, then I would have lost that year entirely. But I broke it literally on the last play before the half. Wow. And was able to redshirt that year. So I sat out my true sophomore year, redshirted, and then played my redshirt sophomore year, which was the next season.
And all 3 of those were with Coach Hackett, correct?
My first 3 were with Paul Hackett. My last 2 were with Pete Carroll.
Yep. So Coach Carroll comes into town, little change of the offense, change in energy, and then kind of off to the races. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, he came in and just turned the program on its side. I mean, he changed and for the better. He changed everything. The way we lifted weights, the way we off-season conditioned, the offense, the defense, the mentality, the energy level, the attention to detail. I mean, he turned everything on its ear. And it took us a while to get going. And I don't know that everybody bought in right away to the new philosophy. But by the time we got halfway through his first year, we were rolling along pretty good.
And people forget, I mean, I love Coach Carroll. He's a guy I admire, a guy I study. People forget it's not like he came out of the NFL with some illustrious record. So he couldn't come in and just be like, hey, I won a Super Bowl in the NFL and you're going to do it like this and we're all going to be successful, right? I mean, there was some street cred he had to earn with the program. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, Paul Hackett had come in from Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah. And he was an NFL guy coming to college. And then sure enough, he gets fired and here comes Pete Carroll, who had just come in from the Patriots or maybe the Jets. But here's another NFL guy. Here we go again. I think it took a little while for everybody to buy in to that program, but he wasn't loved from day one. He was questioned from day one. Mm-hmm. Who's this guy? We need a big name. We need a, John Robinson type figure, a dominant personality. And there was a lot of questions, especially in the LA media. I mean, as soon as that hire was made, it was kind of a surprise hire. There was a bunch of other coaches that were being named as potential candidates, but Pete was on the bottom of the list. It seemed like the whole time as I was tracking it. And then all of a sudden Pete was the guy, and everybody's like, here we go again. Here's another NFL guy trying to come to college. And man, was everybody wrong.
Yeah. I want to do the same exercise with you, because right now there's a college kid out there. He's between his second and third year, let's call it arbitrarily. And his coach is going to get fired or just got fired. And right now with the portal, right, it's so easy just to say, well, I don't like this, I'm going to jump in the portal and go somewhere else. What did you learn in that transition? What could another college kid learn in that transition of, all right, I'm going to have to relearn everything, and I'm going to have to buy into a new culture, and I'm going to have to learn a new offense. Oh, by the way, I'm going to have to earn the job, because I'm sure this coach believes in competition. I'm sure all that was a reality in your situation. You learned a lot of good stuff out of it. What would you tell that kid that's listening, watching right now?
Yeah, there was no portal back in the day.
No.
And I'm a firm believer that you stay and you fight and you compete. I don't agree with the transfer thing. I know there are some scenarios where it makes sense, and I know there are a number of scenarios where it's worked out and a guy is transferred and left. I mean, you look at Kyler Murray; he's a great example. He transferred out of A&M and tried, went to try something new. But I wouldn't change anything I went through for the world. I mean, I learned as a 18-year-old. I was 17. I learned the West Coast offense at 17.
Yep.
Which, as you know, the West Coast offense is not simple. It's not easy. It is pure progression and so different than everything what we're seeing now. But I knew protections. I knew 6, 7, 8 protections. I knew concepts. I knew rhythm of timing, first hitch, second hitch, third hitch, run. And that was great, because as soon as I got to the NFL, or actually before I got to the NFL, as soon as I started, getting interviewed by teams before the draft, I already knew what scat 22 protection and 2 and 3 jet were.
Yep.
And that was years ago, but I filed all that away. And then I learned Norm Chow's offense when Pete Carroll got there. Norm Chow came in as the offensive coordinator, and my play action bootleg knowledge went through the roof. My screen game knowledge went through the roof. So it was awesome. I learned two offenses and knew them inside and out before I got to the NFL. But the grass isn't always greener. And I learned it from Kinsey and Peasy. The grass isn't always greener. And a lot of times it's because there's more horse manure on the other side of the fence. And I think a lot of guys get stuck in that. Man, I'm at, UNLV and I'm transferring to Boise State or whatever that is. Sometimes that situation that looks so good as you're being recruited in the portal, you get there and it may not be as good, or it may be a lot worse. So you don't know what you're getting yourself into. At least if you stay and fight and compete, the situation you're in, and the good and the bad. If you just leave, you could be going to a worse situation. So I look at my situation uniquely. I mean, mine was, I learned NFL style offense straight out of high school into Norm Chow's system, which had a lot of NFL schemes, but totally different verbiage, different schematically different, philosophically different. So that was great. That was great learning. And then the new coach comes in, and I gotta re-win this job. I gotta compete every day. I can't sit back and go, well, I was a starter last year, I'm going to work on this. No, I had to work on everything, and I had to prove myself all over again to an entirely new staff from top to bottom. So my situation may have been different than a lot of guys are thinking about that portal and thinking about looking for greener pastures. But I'm of the mindset that you stay and you compete. You try to win the job, and if you don't win it, you don't win it. But I go back to Matt Castle all the time. Matt Castle was my backup. And then I left, and he competed with Matt Leinart in USC and lost the job. And it turns out Matt Castle ended up playing a lot more games than guys he got beat out by, and played a lot longer. And he never played quarterback in college. He stayed and competed. He learned the West Coast offense from Paul Hackett, and then Paul Hackett got fired, learned Pete Carroll's offense, and played different positions and ran down on kickoff and did whatever he could to help the team win. And sure enough, I think he played in the league for like 12, 13 years. and was a starter for longer than other guys around him. So, I just think what you can learn, there's peaks and valleys to every career. And what you learn at the bottom of those valleys, they harden you and they make you a better person, more importantly than a better football player, but they harden who you are, and they show you and at a young age teach you who you are and how to compete and how to work and how to reprove yourself to a new staff and a new group. So I'm a firm believer in staying and fighting and competing.
I love it. It's been such a common theme too. I mean, Hall of Famers, guys with incredible careers, all went through adversity, didn't quit, fought, competed, got hard and do hard things. Blah. I mean, just endless messaging on the show of the best to ever do it, saying the same things you just said. So that's gold dust for all these young kids that they're literally, them and their parents are looking for the easy route, and it's ruining their chance to reach their potential. So thanks for sharing that. Well, it worked out for you. Your senior year was incredible. You win the Heisman Trophy, you throw 33 touchdowns. You ball out. You played in the Orange Bowl that year. Is that correct?
Played in the Orange Bowl against Iowa. Yep.
All right. So just give me a quick little synopsis before we go to our next break on that senior year and how epic, not just personally your achievements, but the team's achievements and what that was like.
Yeah. So my junior year, I started getting recruited by agents, and every agent's telling me to come out. And some guys are saying late first round, but definitely an early second round pick. And other guys are telling me I'll get up in the middle of the first round after my workouts. And our team wasn't real good our junior year. We lost a bunch of seniors. We got really young my senior year and had some true freshmen that had huge impacts on our team. So that's always an unknown when you're going into the next year. You don't know who this new recruiting class, and on the other end of that recruiting class was Mike Williams, who was a receiver out of Florida that Pete brought in and started from the jump at receiver, was a great outlet for me and caught a bunch of those 33 touchdowns. And, but I didn't see that. I didn't know that was on the horizon. I didn't know who Mike Williams was at that time. And I got all these agents in my ear, come out. And I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I hadn't accomplished what I wanted to accomplish in college. I needed another year maturity wise. I wanted to get the NFL. I felt, and I'd been to all these camps, and, as I was being told I was going to be, a second round pick or maybe an end of the first round pick. The ones that were the top picks, I knew those guys. I'd thrown against them. I'd competed them. I'm saying that's bull junk. That I'm better than that guy, and that guy's the top 3 pick. And so that became very competitive for me going into my senior year to prove myself, because I wanted to go to the next level and I wanted to play in the NFL. And I would have been pissed if I would have come out and then the next year a guy that I knew I was better than got drafted 38 spots ahead of me. So that was just kind of like that little dangling carrot that keeps the donkey going down the trail. That little dangling carrot kept me going. And I knew I had more potential than being maybe a second round pick. So I really didn't even think about it very long going into my senior year. I had everybody telling me the same thing, and I wanted to go against the grain and play another year and finish what my freshman class that had come in together started. And so that senior year started, and we lost a heartbreaker to Washington State, who had Jason Gesser at quarterback, who was a phenomenal college football player. And that Wazoo team was really good. And they went on to the Rose Bowl that year. And we went down and I thought we won the game at the end. And there was like 30 seconds on the clock, and they went 80 yards with no timeouts in 30 seconds with a big inside post before Tampa 2 was Tampa 2. Before Tampa 2 had the mic running down the middle, and Jason Gesser hit that inside seam and went all the way down and scored, and the place went nuts, and we walked out and we were 1-1. And here we go again, in LA. Oh, they lost to Wazoo at Wazoo. Here we go again, another SC team. It's Pete Carroll's fault, blah, 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 blah. And that was a turning point for that team. Because we knew we shouldn't have lost that game. We had the game won, and we knew that was probably our best competition in the Pac-12 that year. They were the most loaded Pac-12 team. And then we just kind of took off from there. And by that point, everybody was in, everybody bought into the program and Pete's system. And, we took off from there. And there was a lot of talk back then. There was no playoffs. And that year it was Ohio State with Maurice Claret in Miami when Ken Dorsey and all those horses that were down there in Miami. That team was unbelievable. But we felt that, that we were the best team in the country that year. We didn't get a chance to prove it. So we went down to the Orange Bowl and blew Iowa out and handled them pretty easily. But yeah, I mean, once we lost that game, everybody bought in, things took off, and then I left, and then Pete Carroll era just continued on the upward trajectory and won national championship after national championship.
You didn't even mention you won the Heisman Trophy.
Won the Heisman, which was cool.
That's pretty cool, huh? Where does it sit these days?
So I just got an email. So this is actually interesting. So I was on the Dan Patrick show a couple years ago, and I was in between moves, and it was in a box in the garage. And Dan had asked, can I have it? Can I display it in the man cave on the Dan Patrick show? So I sent it out there. Was sitting in his office for the last couple of years, and I'm being inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in December.
Oh, sweet. And so congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And so the College Football Hall of Fame was wondering if they could get it. So I called up Dan. I'm like, hey, send the Heisman to the College Football Hall of Fame. And so I get an email yesterday that it came in this really nice, big, beautiful case, this metal case with a little key.
Yeah.
And so I get a call that Dan had sent it to the College Football Hall of Fame, but the letter or the envelope that the key was in on the outside of the case had been torn open and the key was gone.
Oh, wow.
So I've got a box. I've got a big, beautiful silver box that the Heisman Trophy is sitting in at the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't know that they can display a big box, but I don't know where those keys are. So if you work for FedEx and you found my keys, please send them.
That's funny. I mean, the Super Bowl trophy came the same way. We lost the keys, and when we moved to Nashville, we drove it up because I couldn't use the box anymore. So I totally get it. All right, we're going to get to our second break. When we come back, we'll talk to Carson about his pre-draft process, and also I'm going to ask him a question as he looks at this from 30,000 feet. What he sees the evolution of quarterback play look like, what his perspective is on that. We'll be right back. Beyond the X's and O's is brought to you by State Farm. Just like State Farm offers surprisingly great rates for your car insurance, I want to share with you a surprisingly great moment from my career, and it came from Super Bowl 35, and it came actually when I was playing terribly. I started off the game brutal, couldn't hit anything, missed Brandon Stokely wide open on a crossing route, and Jamal Lewis in the flat. I didn't have enough energy. We're at a TV timeout. I'm sitting there in the huddle waiting for the play call to come in, and we substitute Sam Gash onto the field. And Sam Gash, one of my favorite teammates of all time, comes up to me, grabs me by the chest plate, and says, "We need your juice. We need your energy. You're not yourself today." I said, "You know what? You're right." And immediately I had that spark. The hair on my arm stood up, and that was the series through the first touchdown to Brandon Stokely of Super Bowl 35. And that's why I love the journey of the quarterback. There's so many surprisingly great lessons to be learned from this unique position. And remember, whether you're a Super Bowl winning quarterback or an armchair QB relaxing happily at home, State Farm provides coverage that meets your needs at a price that fits your budget. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. All right, so we talked about the Heisman Trophy, the incredible senior year, Orange Bowl victory over Iowa, and now you go into the draft. You talked about how you knew you wanted to be a top pick, like the NFL had been on your mind for a long time. Now it's time to go through the process. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I got done. I got done with the Orange Bowl, went through the whole process of hiring an agent. I hired Dave Dunn through Athletes First, who you know very well, who's a phenomenal agent. Amazing.
Best in the business.
And best in the biz. And everybody was telling me, don't play in the Senior Bowl. You don't need to do it. And I was like, well, I want to go down there and I want to go do it. And so Dave and I had a plan, let's go do it. I got nothing to hide. There's a lot of guys that are worried. I wanted to go down there and throw next to the other guys that were getting drafted and throw to the guys that I was going to be playing against and all that. And went down and played in the Senior Bowl. And then just started the whole training process and sharpening up my footwork, working a ton under center, working a ton in gun, and just really started getting ready for the draft. And I had a big meeting with Dave at his office in Orange County, and everybody at that time was saying, all right, the Bengals are going to draft you. And the draft is still months out. And everybody's saying, you can't go there. You can't do it. Cannot go there. It's a quarterback graveyard came up in every conversation I had, and I didn't know. I mean, like I said, I didn't grow up watching football. So I didn't even know the Bengals were never on TV ever, like ever. So I'd never seen a Bengals stadium filled with people and the Bengals playing. I'd never seen a Monday night game with I just didn't know anything about really the AFC North other than Pittsburgh was a really good defense and Baltimore had Ray Lewis. I mean, that was what I knew. But every conversation I was having, different interviews for, radio spots, TV spots. And so I was going through this process of everybody saying you can't do it. And it's kind of like the process of you shouldn't play in the Senior Bowl. Well, I want to. And you shouldn't play your senior year of college. You should come out. Well, I want to play my senior year. And at the time I thought, well, this team, the Bengals, I mean, they've been bad for so long. I'll go there and I'll change it. And the culture there is blah, 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 blah is what I'm hearing. Well, I'll go and I'll change it. So I was of the mind, I was excited about it. I couldn't wait because I always, us quarterbacks, we like proving people wrong. I mean, we like going against the grain and I definitely went against the grain because there wasn't one person that was ever like, oh, it's a great situation. You should do it. You just let them draft you and do it. There was a lot of talk about doing the kind of the Eli Manning thing with the San Diego Chargers to get to New York. And it just was never a thought in my head. It was never an option. And so I just kept training and kept preparing, kept meeting with the Bengals staff and talking football and talking shop and was really looking forward to going there, proving everybody wrong and changing the culture and changing the future.
So I want to hit two things. We got to do these kind of quick. So I don't want to steal too much of your time, but I want your best pre-draft story. But also before we go there, you talked about honing your footwork, gun, under center, just the details and the craft of the position before the draft. Your brother, Jordan, who we've talked about before earlier in the show, has really revolutionized the pre-draft process, getting quarterbacks ready. And sometimes it's poo-pooed by the mainstream media of, oh, that's just underwear Olympics. What can they really do? I know you believe it. I believe it. I mean, I'm Jordan's biggest fan as he does it. That's an important time for these quarterbacks, isn't it? And how much did you get out of it? How much better were you able to get from the end of the Orange Bowl until you were drafted and went to that first OTA?
Just incrementally better. I mean, the more you work at your craft, you're not going to get worse unless you're practicing bad habits. If you're practicing great habits, you're going to incrementally get better over time. And that was my mindset. I didn't go into the draft process saying, hey, I need to completely change the way I throw speed out to the left, or I need to completely change my throwing motion or my delivery and mechanically hit the reset button. I never thought that. I just wanted to continue to build upon the foundation that I had. But sitting there watching the Monday night game last night against the Giants against Kansas City, you see these quarterbacks, and there was a great illustration of it last night. You always fall back on your fundamentals unless you're unfundamentally sound. And I'm not saying anything. I don't know Daniel Jones, and I'm not saying he's fundamentally sound, but there was a couple throws in that game where if he would have relied on his fundamentals in the heat of the moment, when he's got two guys bearing down, and he threw a quick, it was like a wide flare to his right that should have been picked, but the DB fell down. It was right when he was getting hit. He just kind of turned and threw it. He didn't flip his hips, get his feet underneath him, and deliver the ball accurately. And that's what I've always focused on is you can do it in the underwear Olympics. You can make a 5-step drop, hitch, and throw as pretty as anybody. But when you got a guy bearing down on you and it's on the line, do you go to the easy route, which is just the flick and get the ball out and avoid the hit? Or do you flip your hips, stay on platform, and deliver the ball accurately and technically sound? So I'm a firm believer that you do all these reps, you do the underwear Olympics, you work on your footwork as soon as the season's over after you've had a month rest, because those are the things you rely on when the times get tough. And when you're struggling and it's rainy and the wind's blowing 20 knots out of the right to the left, those fundamentals can get you out of a bad situation into a good situation. And so I just think that all these, I understand the underwear Olympics and how many times you bench press 225 pounds. Does it really matter? No, but that ability, if you're an offensive lineman, you've repped 225 a gazillion times, gives you something to hunker down and use when you've got Aaron Donald in front of you and the ground's wet and you've given up two sacks earlier to him. You bury down, you use that power, you keep your hands inside, you push from the same position, you push on that bench, whatever that is, those fundamentals that seem really great and they look really great when coaches are watching you out on the field and there's no defenders on you and you're throwing routes versus air. But when you're not throwing routes versus air and the ground's wet, the ball's wet, the wind's howling, and you got to put that ball on the outside shoulder, your best bet is to get your feet right and be technically sound to keep that ball on the outside shoulder. Because if you're a little bit off technically and fundamentally aren't quite as strong as you should be, that ball ends up on the inside shoulder and the ball knocks down and now you're punting on 4th and 8.
Amen. That was awesome. Any fun pre-draft stories? Any funny things come up? Any memorable stories you haven't told publicly?
It was everybody knew the Bengals were going to draft me. My only pre-draft story, I didn't meet with many teams. Everybody knew the Bengals were taking me. It wasn't, there wasn't, maybe they're going to take a D end or maybe they're going to trade out. The Bengals were taking me. And I actually signed my first contract days before the draft. So, I didn't get, I went to the combine. I was so excited. I was going to meet the big tuna and, all these great coaches, and nobody interviewed me because they all knew I was going to Cincinnati. So I just ended up hanging out in Indianapolis by myself. And I was there with Justin Fargas, one of my old great teammates, Malifo McKenzie and Jacob Rott, and all these guys that I played with. And all these guys are getting to go and meet and talk football and film study. And they come back to the room and everybody's like, oh, I met so-and-so and I did this and I did this. And I was like, dude, I've been sitting and this is before like cell phones really, been sitting in my room watching TV. But that was my whole draft. The other thing I was excited about doing is I get to go to these, all my buddies are getting on flights, flying first class to Chicago to go and see the Chicago Bears facility and going to New England. And I didn't get to go anywhere. Nobody brought me in on a trip. I didn't get to go and do all those things that I was so excited to get to do. I literally went to Cincinnati and nowhere else. But it was also kind of a blessing because all my buddies were on go nonstop, trip after trip after trip, going to see all these different cities and, getting to meet all these coaches and going out to dinner with current players and what have you. And I didn't get to do any of that. I just went to Cincinnati and met with a handful of folks there. And then I was back in Southern California getting ready for the next season.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great pre-draft story. That's incredible perspective. I bet you most people don't even know that. All right. So I'm not going to make you go through your 15-year NFL career. You had an incredible football life on NFL Network. People, if you're watching this, you want to dig into the 15 incredible years that Carson played, go to Football Life and watch his story of his career. But I do want to talk about your rookie year because you sat. They brought in a mutual friend of ours, I think one of the greatest humans on the planet and a very good player, Jon Kitna. He played in front of you, got to watch. Do you value that year watching? And now that you see this conversation every year of these top draft choices coming in, where do you land? Because I've changed. I used to be the pro Carson Palmer, the pro Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, sit for a year, let the older, I always call it the sacrificial lamb because I was a sacrificial lamb for younger guys. Let the older guy play and get his brains beat in, let the younger guy watch. I've kind of changed. I kind of like seeing the young guys play now. What was that year like for you? And what side of the fence do you stand on now, experiencing it with the young guys playing right away?
Yeah, I mean, now I simply think it's contractually based. I mean, when I came out, everybody signed a 5-year contract with a 6-year option.
Yep.
Now it's a 4-year with a 5th-year option. So organizationally, you don't have that buffer of that extra year to give a guy a chance to sit and watch. You've only got 4 years to make a decision on whether or not you're going to pay that guy $40 million a year or not. So you need data, you need footage, you need game footage. And it was great for me personally because I had, like you said, one of the greatest human beings and a great player in Jon Kitna in front of me who absolutely took me under his wing from the day I got there. There was no competition in his eyes. He was there to help me out. and he happened to be the starter for the first year, and that was set in stone. Marvin Lewis, the head coach, said Kitna's going to be the starter. Carson's going to sit back and learn. But that was only because I had that extra year organizationally for the team to sit there and make a decision on year 2, 3, 4, 5 before they gave me an extension. Now, if you let a guy sit, you've only got really 2 years before you have to make that decision. So you've only got essentially 32 games, 34 games now with the 17-game schedule to make that decision. That's just not a big enough window for these owners to make a decision whether they're going to give a guy $100 million guaranteed. So I think that's out the window, unless you're just, Trey Lance is a great example. He's probably not quite ready to play. He didn't play a ton in college. He doesn't have a ton of film to watch. He really, really needs this extra year. I played 4 years in college, so I got the reps playing against high-level competition. But unfortunately, just the way contracts are set up, organizations don't have that extra year to let a guy really sit and learn the game. So, I mean, I thought my situation was great because Jon was way better than I was in year 8 of his career than I was in year 1. But I also got to watch him watch film and lift weights and take care of his body and stand up in front of the room and give a pep talk the night before a game. Stand up in front of the offense after a tough loss that he didn't play as well as he could have, and take it and just eat it. Raise his hand and say, my bad, we lost that game. Because I got to see all those things at 20 years old, 21 years old. So my situation was so different. That was so rare and unique. I think back to Alex Smith's situation with Patrick Mahomes. Alex Smith's the same guy. Alex Smith knew that the writing was on the wall. Patrick's the future, and you can either be for him or against him. And Alex is the kind of guy like Jon. He was for Patrick and helped him along and showed him this is what a pro does. This is how a pro handles his off-season schedule. This is how a pro handles his in-season schedule. So each situation is so dependent really upon the guy that's in front of this young drafted kid. Not everybody has that luxury that Patrick and I had. But now, just contractually, the way it's set up, it's just too hard for these owners to draft a kid 1, 2, or 3 and not get anything out of him in year 1 other than just, a learning year. So the game has changed drastically with the new CBA and the way these rookie contracts are structured.
I want to talk about the CBA real quick, but I want to make one commentary on your career. I do want to lean into this. Audience, understand that when you're playing in the NFL as a quarterback, we watch the other quarterbacks, we study the other quarterbacks, we watch the game film. We also are a very tight-knit fraternity in the offseason. Carson was a guy that was widely recognized amongst us fraternity NFL quarterbacks as an elite talent, an elite competitor, an elite leader. And all of us sympathized with him because he didn't play for great teams. And I would define, this is dumbing down your career, but if I had to define Carson Palmer's career, I think you're one of the greatest of all time of taking bad teams and making them good. Everywhere you went, where you started, whether it was the Bengals, Oakland, Arizona, was struggling. And the acquisition of you, not just as a player, but as a presence in that organization, turned bad programs into really, really competitive programs. So I want to make sure I said that. But speaking of the CBAs, you played through 2 of them, I believe. You played a long time. You saw a lot of change in the NFL. Talk to me about the evolution of the quarterback. I'm blown away by it, and I get to see it more so than you at me and your brother Trevor on the country and see these kids at a young age. We watch their development. I always say there's 50 high school kids every year, maybe 70, that are way better than I was at that age. It's remarkable how many young, good players there are. And then based on their experiences in college, who they're around, who they play with, the systems they play in, really determines their success. But as you watch it from afar, are you as impressed as I am with the quality of the position?
I am. There's a lot more weight being put in playmaking ability and being able to win than there is in height and weight and RPMs on a football and velocity on the ball. But going back to kind of what you were saying with the evolution of the position, I think a lot of that is because of the new structure. Yes. And when you have Kyler Murray is another great example. he really only played 1 year college football. And then he was really the starter from the day he got drafted in Arizona. And they brought in Cliff Kingsbury, who was a college coach. You don't have a chance to teach him the West Coast offense. You don't have a chance to put in the system that you really want to run. All Cliff did was take what he did at the University of Oklahoma and what he was comfortable with and build upon that. And because you don't have that year to sit back and learn and understand, 12 new protections, they're going to be in every game plan, minus 1 or 2 or add 1 or 2 here and there. You got to go with what these guys that have done in the past that made them successful in the past and find a way to make it work in the NFL. And that's what you're seeing. The RPO, the evolution of the game, all the runners you're seeing that maybe don't throw it as good as some of the pocket passers, but they add that extra element of being able to win with their legs and move the chains with their legs. So I think it's a combination of, we only have 4 years to make a decision on this guy. Let's do what he did best in college and put it into what we're doing in the NFL. And like the portal talked earlier, there's very few guys that, like you and I, that played their entire college career and have all those reps and have all those experiences. There's a lot of guys that Kyler Murray started off at Texas A&M and then went to Oklahoma, and then the next year he's in the NFL. There's a lot of turmoil there. There's a lot of lost in translation, different systems. So going back and doing what he did that made him the Heisman Trophy winner and almost a national champion in college, and implementing it into your system with a very short window because of the new CBA of how many hours that kid can be at the facility learning and lifting weights and practicing, everything got scrunched. And so you have to, I love what Cliff's done. You have to take what they did and what they know well and what they're comfortable with and make them comfortable as possible in week 1, and then build to week 2, week 6, week 10, week 17. So, it does blow me away, the success that guys are having at an early age, because I'll never forget when Ben Roethlisberger started as a rookie after I forget who the quarterback, Tommy Maddox was the starter. He got hurt, and then Roethlisberger came in, and everybody was like, "Oh man, you can't win with a rookie quarterback." I don't think they lost a game that year until maybe early in the playoffs. But that was like the first real success story of a youngster coming in and just taking over and playing. Whether he played good or not, they won. But playing early and being on a successful team just wasn't in the cards. It wasn't something that happened. It wasn't something that people talked about until Roethlisberger came in and did that in Pittsburgh. So that was a really interesting thing to see a young guy come in from a smaller school, Miami of Ohio, and have such great success early on in his career.
Well, it's really interesting. And I want to talk about your family, then we'll let you go. But last year I was cleaning out my garage in my home in Tahoe, and I stumbled upon, they must have been there for 20 years, old playbooks from my rookie and second year with Sam Weish in Tampa. And then when I got back to Nashville, I was going through, we were moving homes there too. And I found my Seahawks and Ravens playbooks. And I started going through them. I just sat down on the floor and you're so right. I mean, it was 9 protections a week. We had 75 code words for formations, motions, and plays under Weish. Run checks. I got into like the run list, and like we'd go into a game with 8 runs and all of them had multiple checks in them. And you have the same experience, 15 years. I wanted to like go get me, like you, me, Bledsoe, one other guy, and like get all the playbooks together and be like, this is how hard it was when you were young. And you just said it perfectly. Now they come in and yeah, they have stuff to learn, but they're going to morph the system around the quarterback and even change their nomenclature. They'll change old playbooks around a college kid's nomenclature so he can learn it faster. I really applaud the NFL for changing and allowing young quarterbacks to have more success early on. So just to add color what you were saying. Finally, we always talk about this, the most important part of your journey, your family. Let's finish up with just talking about your family and the impact they've had on your journey as a quarterback.
Yeah. My mom and dad raised 2 NFL players. My brother played, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, played for just about every team in the league.
I think he played for 33 teams in 8 years, but go ahead.
Something like that. I think that's pretty accurate. But yeah, I mean, my dad didn't play, but loved the game because I loved it. But he never had to like come home and say, hey, did you get your workout in today? Hey, do you want to go throw? It was always me asking him and him never saying no. Hey, Dad, let's go throw. As he walks in the door, unbutton his tie and suit. And, yep, let's go. I'll go upstairs and change. So, but he never pushed it. He never forced it. We talked about Bob Johnson early in these weekend clinics. He never had to wake me up, say, hey, we got to be at the field in 30. I was up. I was ready to go. It was never forced upon me. And that's something I talk to parents about that ask a lot of questions is if you want it too bad, that's a problem. You can't want it too bad for your kid because that if you got it, you got it. And I live in Idaho now and we're going through this with my 7th grade son. He's got it. And you can be found anywhere. If you got it, you got it. And I'm not just talking about can he throw a spiral and can he throw it far? He can do that, but he's got it from a mentality. He is on my brother's platform, QB Summit. He watches all the videos. He does I think there's a Sunday afternoon Zoom call that he gets. He can't wait for it. He can't wait to come home and throw. He can't, his jersey is washed. His pants are ready to go. Like there's no, my dad never drugged me to practice. He never forced me to get in the gym. He never said, hey, did you throw today after school with your receivers? That was never, he never forced it upon us, which I think made me want it even more. I think if my dad would have been harping on me, hey, you should throw tomorrow. Hey, you should lift some weight. If that was the dialogue between he and I may not have loved the game as much. But I'm a firm believer. If you got it, you got it. And there's some parents that maybe their kid doesn't have it physically, but they have it in their heart. And I see it a lot with my brother's camps now that my son is now doing my brother's camps and they're working on this game that way. There's a bunch of kids out there that you see him throw. You're like, oh my goodness, he doesn't have a shot. He can't throw it from here to there. But I asked Jordan about him. He's like, dude, I told his dad that, but the kid, everything I asked him to do, he did it 12 times that week. And fundamentally, he's technically flawless because he works at it and he works at it and he works at it. There's room in the game for that player. There's no doubt about it. But you either got it or you don't. And sometimes, unfortunately, there's parents that the parents got it and the kid doesn't. And it doesn't seem like it works out very well in the end for that group.
It's so true.
So, I mean, there's so many parents that they want it so bad for their kid and maybe they harp on it too much that maybe the kid does have it, but they've been deterred because of the way their mom or dad has handled the situation. So my biggest advice for parents is don't say no. No, you could be in the middle of a really important email that's got to be out by 5 and it's 3:30 and your son comes home and wants to play catch. Yes. Just don't say no. That's the one thing I can say that my dad never said was, no, I'm not going to take you on Saturday because I want to go play golf. Or no, I'm not going to take you down to the field and do calisthenics and run gassers and because I got a meeting I got to prep for, or whatever that is. Be open, be available. I think that's one of the best things you can do for your kids that want to be athletes in whatever sport it is. Make yourself available. Because, as a kid, you ask your dad and he's like, no, I got to do this and this. It can feel like what's so important in your world as the kid, maybe it's not that important because your parent doesn't have time. But if it's so important to you as a kid, I need to go throw 50 balls. And your dad says yes, and he's willing to drop whatever he's in the middle of and stop what he's doing and say yes to, then all of a sudden as a kid, you realize, oh, it's as important to him as it is me. This is great. Let's go do it. Let's go improve. Let's get better. Let's be ready to compete harder. So I think that's the best advice that parents in this generation can get is don't want it too bad for your kid. Recognize whether they got it and whether got it from a physical standpoint and an ability standpoint, but also got it from a mental standpoint and a capacity standpoint where they want to take that on. They want to work and they want to compete. They want to spend a ton of hours away from their head coach and their team on their own. And they want to get better and they want to improve. So just all in on that. Just facilitate that as much as you can as a parent. Give them as many opportunities they can if they truly want it, but don't want it so bad that you're dragging them off the couch playing video games to go and work out or to go to practice or whatever that may be.
Wow. That's why we're doing the show. That was the perfect ending. I hope you all listened. I mean, this is a guy that had an incredible career, is a great father, great husband, has done everything the right way, and now just gave you some gold dust to help you raise your kids as they chase this journey. Carson, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your wise words.
Anytime, TD. Good catching up, man.
Big thanks to my dear friend Carson Palmer. What a wise voice. What a great player it was. And a big thanks to our friends at State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Go to statefarm.com today to get a quote.